Hopefully we've all begun Lent well. Tonight we're going to kind of go back into the commandments, and so this is what I'm going to title it. So fourth commandment is, I would entitle it, the rehabilitation of authority and the reappreciation of obedience. So I don't know if you've been preparing. I mean, heaven forbid we should actually prepare before we come to RCIA, but if you have, if you've been reading ahead, because we're just making our way through the commandments, you might have noticed that the fourth commandment is a lot more involved than it might appear to be. So we're going to walk our way through some of this tonight. So the fourth commandment we find in Exodus chapter 20 and Deuteronomy 5, again, where all the commandments are. So this is Exodus 20. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Note the promise. As St. Paul would say, it is the first commandment with a promise. It's not just honor your father and your mother, it's honor your father and your mother so that, or that you may have a long life in the land which the Lord your God gives you. There's another passage in Sirach chapter 3. It's up here. You might just want to take a note of it, but this is an exceptional passage to pray with as children, especially who have, I mean, whether you're my age in your 50s and you still have a or both parents alive, or you're younger, but there's some extraordinary things said by the Lord in this passage. Listen to me, your father, O children, and act accordingly, that you may be kept in safety. For the Lord honored the father above the children, and he confirmed the right of the mother over her sons. Whoever honors his father atones for sins and preserves himself from them. When he prays, he is heard. And whoever glorifies his mother is like one who lays up treasure. Whoever honors his father will be gladdened by his own children, and when he prays, he will be heard. That's twice that's been said now. Whoever glorifies his father will have long life, and whoever obeys the Lord will refresh his mother. He will serve his parents as his masters. Honor your father by word and deed, that a blessing from him may come upon you. For a father's blessing strengthens the houses of the children, but a mother's curse uproots their foundations. Do not glorify yourself by dishonoring your father, for your father's dishonor is no glory to you. For a man's glory comes from honoring his father, and it is a disgrace for children not to respect their mother. O son, help your father in his old age, and do not grieve him as long as he lives. Even if he is lacking in understanding, show forbearance and do not despise him all the days of his life. For kindness to a father will not be forgotten, and against your sins it will be credited to you, a house raised in justice to you. In the day of your affliction it will be remembered in your favor. As frost in fair weather, your sins will melt away. Whoever forsakes his father is like a blasphemer, and whoever angers his mother is cursed by the Lord. And then one last passage in the same book, the book of Sirach, chapter 7. With all your heart, honor your father, and do not forget the birth pangs of your mother. Remember that through your parents you were born, and what can you give back to them that equals their gift to you? Those are really rich passages to pray with. And the promises that God makes in them are astounding. So unfortunately, we live in a culture that doesn't typically show honor. I often think about this when we get to this commandment. You know, most of us don't experience or hear honoring of other persons on a regular basis. We have negative humor. We have roasting of others. even when it comes time for someone's birthday at work or someone's birthday in the family, or we supposedly want to quote unquote honor somebody in the family, it rarely leaves somebody feeling built up. Instead, because we just don't know how to do this, it's almost, it seems to be anyway. I know for me, the first time I really saw this, I was in my early 20s, and I lived in a household of guys. Actually, Father Prentice was one of the guys who lived there at the time. And so it was whenever one of us would have a birthday, there was about 14 guys who lived in the house. And when one of us had a birthday, we would all go around the table at dinner, and we would honor the brother. And so each person would just take time saying something to, like, Ken, I just want to tell you, like, I see these things, and these things in you, and gosh, I admire the heck out of that. I wish I had that in myself. And by the time you are done, I mean, the guy who's getting honored is overwhelmed, right? It's not flattery. Flattery is either not true or it's for a selfish purpose. It's honoring. When you got married, if you're married, you promised to love and honor your husband or your wife all the days of your life, which usually means, most practically, that I'm going to use the gift of speech to build up my spouse. That's the most practical way that it's experienced. Tragically, that's not the norm. But remember, we were on retreat, for those of us who had a chance to get away, we were talking about the sacrament of marriage. When we talk about how marriage is this tangible, visible sign of the invisible reality, which is the love that Jesus has for his church, one of the ways that we do that is we speak to one another, or we're commissioned and then equipped to speak to one another as the Lord would speak to us. That's how we're supposed to speak to each other in a family. That's why we desperately need to rehabilitate authority and reappreciate obedience, I would suggest. So there's a lot in this. I don't think we'll get to everything. So let's start here. Let's start with authority. So I'm going to read something, if I can, because this is kind of a synthesis of what I think is kind of the issue that regards this. We've talked about this in different contexts before. The biggest challenge for most people in coming into the Catholic Church or in becoming Christian is authority. I just don't want to surrender. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of the reasons are because I've been burned by other people. When I have entrusted myself to others, I've gotten hurt. Or I look at examples from history and I go, I don't think those people can be trusted. But the biggest issue is we're all wired to just not surrender because of the fall. So God created us to be in relationship with him. It should be obvious to look at the crucifix and go, I don't think anybody loves me like that. Hey, I'm yours. But we don't do that. We hedge bets. We test God. We put up obstacles. We come up with justifications, rationalizations, excuses of all kinds so as to dodge the issue of surrendering my life to God. But you cannot be a disciple without surrendering your life to God. And that's what it means to be Catholic. I'm going to give you, Lord, permission to own my life. That's why the days that we're in right now are days of kind of ever-increasing intensity. If he doesn't own your life, someone else does. Or something else does. And whoever that someone or something is, it ain't the God who made you and who laid his life down for you. And therefore, it will either disappoint us or it will crush us. But it's hard. I mean, this is the, I was going to say the crux, but that's doubly so true, right? This is the issue, I think, for all of us. So part of it is just trying to get a healthy understanding of authority, because it's not, it's not something which has, it's not something we've exercised well often in our lives. I know I haven't. So here's this little thing. Not infrequently, authority is understood as the power to arbitrarily impose one's will upon another or upon others. It is equated commonly with domination and a curtailment of another's freedom. But the word authority is from the Latin auctoritas, meaning to cause, to sponsor, to promote, and from augere, to increase and to enrich. So the nature of authority must be distinguished from power and coercion. Power does not promote freedom, and coercion ends it. True authority, on the other hand, is always in the service of others and their freedom. Its object, so the object of authority is always to help men and women to attain their full humanity. It helps the other to reach fulfillment. The ultimate authority is God. And God is not dominating, and he's not oppressive toward his creation, but he's generous. Simply out of love, God creates. Creation itself need not be. It is totally free. It's God's gift. God, therefore, is not a threat to his creation or his creation's freedom and life. That's the whole point of looking at the commandments right now. God is the very ground of creation's being and its nature and its substance. Within created reality, God has created the human person so that he or she can share in God's own divine life. God's creative act is so powerful that it endows the very contingency of the creature with the abundance of the Creator's own gift. There is then in creation and causality an initiative on God's part. God takes the first step. The initiative of God reaches its fulfillment in Jesus, who not only in his words, but above all by his passion, death, and resurrection shows the extent of God's love, generosity, and goodness. In the process, he also reveals definitively the true meaning of authority. One could say that the words and deeds of Jesus are in the service of the human person and his or her freedom. Ultimately, it's only through the paschal mystery, that's the death, the resurrection of Jesus, is the human person able to reach fulfillment, which is to share in the divine life. So all human authority finds its concrete model in Jesus. To be genuine, all human authority must resemble Christ's. When applied to the marital relationship, for example, the measure of a husband's headship is none other than Jesus. Just as Jesus cared for his bride and gave his whole life for her, so too must a husband. In Jesus, we see conclusively that God's authority is rooted in his love for his creation. So too, among human persons, the only true source of headship is love. When authority is understood rightly, one is able to see that there is a great responsibility on the part of the human person to whom that position is given. His task is to care for the ones entrusted to him or her, to ensure the well-being of the others, to, in some sense, seek to increase the life of the others, just as all of human creation must respond in some fashion to God's generous and loving initiative, so too must those placed under the care of other men and women. That's a lot, sorry, but I belabor authority because I know my own life, it's the struggle. I'm the only person in this room who's made a promise of obedience. Nobody else here has. You promised to love and honor your husband and your wife, but I promised obedience to my archbishop and his successor, whoever that will be. And it's easy to be obedient to someone who you respect highly. It's not when you don't. And yet it's a promise I make. So I can testify to you of the freedom that comes from promising obedience and to living a life of obedience. So people look at priests all the time and go, they get hung up on chastity. Chastity is nothing in comparison to obedience. Obedience is the grind. That's where my pride kicks in. You want me to do what? Do you know who I am? Moi? I mean, so I'm literally at the back end call. So when I came here to Good Counsel 11 years ago, I met with the cardinal. I was at another parish at the time, and he called me and said, hey, I'd like to sit down with you. I'm like, okay, can you tell me what it is? No, I'll tell you when you get here. Okay? Actually, he didn't even call me. His secretary called me. So I sit down, and he says, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. I'd like you to go to Our Lady of Good Counsel. I said, can I pray about that? And he looks at me. I'll never forget this. He looks at me. He says, you can. But what are you going to hear? I'm asking you to go. And you promised obedience to me. And I went, you're right, I'll go. Sorry, stupid question. But it was so spot on. You can, but I'm asking you. So, again, I can just testify to, these are the paradoxes of the Christian life. You want to be free, you got to die. You got to become a slave to Christ. You got to give. You want real freedom? Get into a relationship of obedience, first with God, and then live in and under authority as it's properly understood. Because God never wields his power over us. Therefore, we can never truly, if we're living as we should as his disciples, wield power over others. We have to exercise, whether I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a pastor, I'm a president, I'm a governor, I'm a mom, a dad. Those are the places where you first experience it. That's why this commandment's so rich, because our understanding of authority starts at home. And so this commandment not only entails directives to children, it commands directives to parents. Because parents are going to shape forever the understanding of their children's lives. I was meeting with a woman today who's older than I am, and children early 20s, probably early mid-20s to 40. And we were talking about their lives and what's going on in their lives, and they're all experiencing trauma right now, and it all comes from events which happened when they were 6, 8, and 10. And that's the norm. No matter how old we are, where we live, what we drive, where we work, how much we make, we got issues in our lives that go all the way back to how it is that we were raised and what we experienced. Maybe I had an abusive dad. Maybe I had a deadbeat dad. Maybe I had a domineering mom. Maybe I had a great mom and a great dad. But that experience is irreplaceable. God can compensate for it, praise be Jesus. But it leaves a unique mark. So the commandment's rich. Does that make some sense? Yeah. So a favorite passage, flip to Mark chapter 10. Mark 10, starting in verse 35. So if you got children, if you got people who report to you at work, if you coach kids, if you teach, well, there's almost not a one in us in here who doesn't have authority over other persons in some degree or another. This is an extraordinary passage to pray with. Mark 10, starting in verse 35. So James and John, this is 2 of the 12. So these are 2 of Jesus' best friends. They're brothers, the sons of Zebedee. Their nickname is the sons of thunder. All right, these are not little meek and mild guys. Came forward to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." That's a bad way to talk to Jesus, by the way. And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory." So we want to be right there, Lord. We want the positions of influence. So we're jockeying now. Looks like the crowds are behind you. Things are looking good for you. When you come into whatever it is you're coming into, because we've never seen anybody who can do what you do, because people don't raise the dead, and you do. People don't heal the blind, but you do. People don't feed 5,000 people with a couple of loaves of bread, but you do. So this is going somewhere. So we're getting in now. We want to be at your right and your left. What do we need to do? Jesus said to them, you don't know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the chalice that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized, which refers to his passion? They said to him, we are. And Jesus says to them, here's the casual way of translating Jesus' answer, you will. The chalice that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right and my left is not mine to grant. It is for those for whom it has been prepared. And when the 10 heard it, so here's the other 10 guys, they're kind of ticked off because they didn't get a chance to jockey in earlier. They began to be indignant at James and John, because this is what we do, right? And Jesus called them to him, and he said to them, you know that those who are supposed to rule over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them. Or in another translation is, and their great ones make their authority felt. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be the slave of all. For the Son of Man also came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That is the passage on authority. The corollary to that would be, if you flip to the Gospel of John, John chapter 13. So the universe is made up of hundreds of billions of galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. It's something to the order of 46 billion light years across and ever expanding. That's a number beyond comprehension. God made each and every one of those stars. He knows them by name. He brought them into existence by saying, let there be light. And the God who made the universe in John 13 is in the position of a servant, actually a slave, stripped, with a towel around his waist, and a bowl in front of him, washing feet. That's authority. One of the most striking things I've seen at several weddings over the last couple of years, after a bride and a groom cut the cake, the bride is placed in a chair, and rather than the tossing of a garter, the husband comes over and washes her feet. Has anybody ever been in a wedding where they've seen that? When you do, you never forget it. That's authority. That's headship. That's real headship. That's the scriptural vision of headship. The husband is head of his wife as Christ is head of his bride, the church. Jesus is head by laying down his life. That's what it means to be head. Not head like I dominate you. Ladies, if you're engaged to get married, and he ain't willing to do that, don't marry him. And I mean it. Don't marry him. And guys, if you're engaged to a woman, and you're not willing to do that, then either make a decision you're going to start to do that or end it. The relationship will be painful otherwise. Because that's love. And that's the purpose of authority. And so a husband and a wife are the first persons experience. This is why Christian marriage is so vastly different. Because a man and a woman are supposed to have already encountered the love of God, the authority of God. They know it. And so now they understand this is what I'm entrusted with communicating to the person that I'm marrying. And then if God should bless them with children, now we have a natural extension. We communicate that to our children too. Yes, we're going to civilize barbarians because that's what children are. Right? They're not little angelic cherubs. They're willful little creatures who are developing personalities. But they're willful and rebellious, and they are, right? I mean, like, I am a little snot, and I was worse when I was a child. And my mom and dad had to train me. And some of it took, and some of it didn't. But that's the task of parenting, right? These are not noble savages. These are products that are in desperate need of conversion, transformation, learning. And because we're inclined to be selfish, that's why 2-year-olds are the way they are, right? I just don't understand this child. Really? It's a willful creature in desperate need of salvation. Doesn't matter how old it is. Once it's got a personality and it's got a will, it's going to act out. So, and as a parent, if I know how to model the authority of Jesus, I'm going to be able to do it one way. It's still going to be challenging. And if I don't, it could be just painful. It's going to be painful either way, right? To have children is to have pain. But it could be just for me, or it could be for me and for them. What's that? Don't scare them. Oh, I want to scare the hell out of them. I want to scare them out of hell, one or the other. It'd be worth it. Yeah, because we just need it. We need that, right? Like, I need a healthy dose of what it is that life's about, right? I mean, you guys you ain't the Waltons. And the Waltons had issues. You don't even know who the Waltons are. It doesn't matter. All right. I make references to Father Dave. He goes, huh? How old are you? All right, so that's a little something on authority. So we need to rehabilitate authority. We got to get, we desperately, like I desperately need, not you guys, I desperately need Jesus to teach me over and over again how to exercise authority and not to wield power. Because the inclination at times is just to go, because I said so. And I'm the pastor. Isn't that too bad? You get a new pastor, maybe he'll be different. But I got to try not to do that. I got to fight that selfish tendency and try to listen and go, okay, let's do this, and here's why. How does that sound? Or to listen and go, I like that. Let's implement that. As opposed to just see that I get to be in charge. St. Augustine once famously said, with you, I'm a sheep. For you, I'm a shepherd. The first one brings me great comfort. The second one scares me, because I will have to give account to the chief shepherd for how I've shepherded. You won't, except for your children. And I know I got a lot to answer for. That's why we just ask people to pray for us, that we would be good shepherds, because it's easy to be a bad parent. Just go ahead, go do whatever. And it's easy to be a bad shepherd. So we need God to rehabilitate our understanding of authority. We also need him to reclaim obedience. And we've talked a lot about obedience now. So obedience just means to hear from. Jesus is the model of obedience. Jesus' whole life, this is the eternal Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, the one through whom the universe was made. He is obedient. And he's not just obedient to God, he's obedient to Joseph and Mary, which is amazing. Jesus goes home when he's a child, after he leaves Nazareth, or after he leaves the temple in Jerusalem, and he was obedient to his parents. Parents that he created. He's not experiencing a throttling of his life. Mary is the exemplar of obedience. She's the most obedient human person that ever lived. Jesus is a divine person with a human nature. So we want to ask the Lord to help us to live truly a life of both obedience and of authority. Okay, let's look at the commandment itself. So who does this thing involve? So the fourth commandment, this is, we're going to look through the catechism. We're just going to plow through some things. So 2199, flip to that if you wouldn't mind. And if you didn't bring your catechism, I'll try to put what I got up there. So the fourth commandment is addressed expressly to children in their relationship to their father and mother, because this relationship is the most universal. It likewise concerns the ties of kinship between members of the extended family. It requires honor and affection and gratitude toward elders and ancestors. Finally, it extends to the duties of pupils to teachers, employees to employers, subordinates to leaders, citizens to their country, and to those who administer or govern it. This commandment includes and presupposes the duties of parents, instructors, teachers, leaders, magistrates, those who govern, all who exercise authority over others or over a community of persons. So it's not just, if it was just to children, it would only be a page, but I mean, the section in the catechism goes on and on and on. I mean, it's from 2196 to 2257. It's far vaster than one would suppose. At least I know it was for me the first time I made my way through the catechism. And there's a promise entailed. So this is 2200. Observing the fourth commandment brings its reward. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Respecting this commandment provides, along with spiritual fruits, temporal fruits of peace and prosperity. Conversely, failure to bring it brings great harm to communities and to individuals. I was just in a home not too long ago, and while I was in the home, so I'm there. There was a set of young people in the house, and one of the young persons asked one of their parents a question, didn't like the answer that the parent gave, and just immediately exploded. Like I was standing right there. And I thought, oh my goodness. Like this wasn't a 4-year-old exploding. This was a teenager exploding. And those of you with kids at home right now, I mean, this is why we're praying and fasting for families on Wednesdays. The assault in family life is insane. And tragically, our young people are just exposed to so much disorder that they just, whereas once we might have acted out behind my mom and dad's back, I would have, trust me, at most one time would I have done what I saw this child do. It would never have happened again. Out of sheer terror for what my dad would have done. And out of sheer fear of having offended him and my mom. But kids aren't like that now. And so what we're seeing, the reason why that's important, what we're seeing is we're just seeing disordered home lives. And so if we're serious about trying to live radical lives of discipleship, which equals genuine freedom, it means we got to think about what major changes we can make in our homes so as to ensure that they become places of peace. And that's going to be very personal for each and every one of us. how we do that. For a lot of us, it's really control what comes into the home. Because so much of what comes into the home via whatever technological source promotes instability and a lack of peace, and not peace and stability. So remember, what God's trying to get at in each of the commandments is, thou shalt not be a slave. I made you for freedom. I made you for happiness. To have a rebellious household is happy for neither the children nor the parents. And as parents, we can take back our homes. We can do that first and foremost by praying and taking authority over our homes. And then by forgetting this whole idea of aspiring to be your child's friend. My dad was not my friend when I was young. But by the time I got into my 20s, he was my best friend. Precisely because he was not my friend when I was a child. But I respected the heck out of him. I knew he loved me. But the idiotic notion of acting like I was his peer was just that, an idiotic notion. And he had a gentle way of reminding me of that. And so, unfortunately, we're not seeing that oftentimes. So, don't take that for more than what it's worth. But we just want to. If we're going to be what God made us to be, and then if we're going to offer something to the world in which we live, which is an attractive leaven, it means looking at our homes and going, what can we do in our homes to make them more peaceful? And I'll more or less promise you, whatever it is you come up with is going to hurt. At least initially. Because it's going to have the feeling of power being wielded when in fact it's not, it's authority. So remember, authority doesn't mean you just let the other person do whatever they want, because that would not be good for them. Sometimes what's good for the person is to say, no. Can't put your hand in the Vitamix. That's an aircraft engine going on in there. That will spin up your hand, chew up your hand. No, not doing that. It looks fun. No, we're not doing it. Yeah, so if you try to change authority at home to create peace, it's going to probably first create anything other than peace, right? Right, so that's true. That's why most people don't do anything, because I'm afraid of, so the fear is this is bad, but the effort to make it better looks so Herculean, I'm not even going to try it. So we just don't do it. It's the same in relationships. It's the same for a lot of marriages. The effort to work at this looks so arduous. I'll live with this. I'll settle. So that's what we got now. We got families and marriages that are settling. Ken and Signe can testify to this in their work with married couples and couple prayer. But just the radical transformations that we see in people who go through couple prayer. So they teach a course on how to pray together as a couple, which is, I'll still say this, hands down the most intimate thing you'll ever do with your partner. There's nothing more intimate than to pray with somebody. It's far more intimate than sex, because there's no masks. That's why most couples don't pray together. It's more intimate. But when a couple is willing to take the step and go, okay, you know what, we're going to give this a shot, and they invite God in, awkward as it is at first. I mean, over and over again, we see people's testimonies by the time we get to the conclusion of the course, this saved my marriage from divorce. This totally changed our relationship. Just learning how to pray together. It might have been years of one of them dragging the other or begging the other, will you come to something? And so, I mean, it was work, huh? But by the time they walk out, not always, right? But often, remarkably often, there's fruit. So it's like pruning something, huh? I mean, if you're going to get growth in a flower or a plant, you got to prune it. Well, if the plant could talk and you're coming at it with shears, it's going to scream, right? But if I don't prune it, it won't grow. It'll get choked, and there'll be no fruit. And so that's how God is with us. He's like, hey, how are you? And he's coming with, except his are like this, you know? And he just starts to cut. And it always hurts. I mean, discipline is painful, but it's for a purpose. I'm sorry, what if it's not the outcome it's intended to be? So you never know how it's going to go, right? You don't get to see that in advance. So the question is, are we doing, especially as a husband and a wife, a mom and a dad, are we convinced this is what it is that God's asking us to do now? You can never know for certain if... No, hell is paved with good intentions, or the road to it. So the good intention's not enough. I mean, so you want to seriously... This is where communication becomes so crucial in a relationship. We got to talk. What's going on in our kids' lives? What do you think we need to do here? Let's go pray. So that scene in Hacksaw Ridge that I love so much when, this medic's on the top of the ridge and his whole battalion is left. They haven't abandoned him. He stayed behind. So they're all gone. He's there. He's in the middle of a battle. He's like the only healthy man still there in the middle of this battle. And he stays there so as to rescue people who are wounded. And before he does anything, he prays. And this is how he prays. He says, what is it you want of me? I don't understand. I can't hear you. That's how he prays. And as soon as he finishes that, he hears a guy out in the battlefield cry out, "Medic, help me." And he goes, "All right." He puts his helmet on and he runs into the battle. He finds the man. That is an extraordinary image for how a husband and a wife should pray for their children. What is it you want? I don't understand. I can't hear you. Show us, Lord, where our son or our daughter is crying. So it's usually what they're not saying, right? Because this is not usually about this. It's about that. I need to know what the that is. And I got to trust as a man or a woman of prayer, because the Lord has entrusted children to parents, that the Lord will help us to see things. That's how I pray for this parish. Like I pray for the parish like a doctor. I mean, that's the image I have when I pray about us. I just try to ask the Lord, show me where we're healthy and where we're not, so I can know what it is you're asking me to do. And then I try to listen, and then I talk. I talk with those, who I trust, who are around me, who help lead. But that's the image. So that's a parent's task too, huh? That's a husband or a wife's task. Lord, show me what's going on in my wife's life. Show me what's going on in my husband's life. I'm seeing this behavior. I'm hearing these words. But I need to make sure I'm hearing you rightly, that I'm actually hearing what is or is not being said, and then show me how to respond, how to act, how to love. Mindful that the Lord wants to use a spouse to heal the other spouse, because he wants the spouse to be a sign of his love. Does that make sense? So it's most of us, so there's a spiritual vice called acedia, which is a devastating vice. So acedia is basically acknowledging that's going to be too much work. No, I ain't going to do it. And so you just settle. So yeah, I could be great, but that would mean a lot of changes in my life. And I don't want to make those changes. It just looks too hard. And so we just settle. And I get that. I mean, it's easy to just settle. But God's always calling me to more. Because he doesn't want me to settle. Because anytime I settle, I'm not growing. And anytime I'm growing, I'm getting pruned and cut and harnessed and disciplined, and it always hurts. Because we like comfort zones. I mean, I love comfort zones. That's why we don't like change. But if I'm not changing, I'm not alive. Like, to be alive is to be continually changing and growing. it's tragic, actually, in marriage counseling to sit down with someone and hear that one of the spouses say to the other, "You've changed." Duh. Like, even if I'm 24 hours older than I was yesterday, of course I've changed. Like, we don't stay where we were. We don't marry a mannequin. Not yet, anyway. Maybe one day. The way we're going. So this is difficult stuff, huh? I mean, that's why this commandment is so vast. And these are the things that it stirs up. I find it to be profoundly worth diving into. It's just rich to me. And especially when you look at the repercussions of doing this well and not doing it well. And here's the challenge, right? You could be the Virgin Mary, and your child could still turn out to be Damien. No offense to anybody here named Damien. So could turn out to be just a hellion. All right? So my mom and dad were saints. I was not. And it wasn't their fault. It was my fault. And parents, and there's parents in here, right, who've loved the Lord, followed the Lord, raised their children well, given them a good example, taught them the faith, whose children have wandered away. There is nothing that I know of in a parent that causes more pain than that. Nothing. Nothing. And so the evil one just tries to play on that and see what you did? You did something wrong. You could have been better, Eloise. Well, of course you could have been better. But that's not why they are the way they are. Because they're free, they got a will, they can choose to do things. So we can only do the best we can. At the end of the day, because since we're all children, we have to own it. And your children are going to have to own it. You can't make your child a disciple. You can only offer them a witness. And then continue to walk with them and be with them. That's why our vision here is what it is, to offer every person in our community a life-changing encounter with Jesus. That's all I can do is offer you that. I can't make you one. You have to choose. And parents have to just let that go. And remember, these children are the Lord's children first. And He gave them to me, and He's always at work in them. And even if you're, 55 years old and just now you're waking up to the reality of faith and you're going, oh my gosh, I blew it with my kids. No, you didn't. Don't worry. God has an amazing capacity to make up for things. God's not thwarted by anything that happened. He has lots of friends. He brings people into other people's lives. He's conspiring to get all of us back. So have hope. Be careful. You don't give in to the enemy, all right? Does that make sense? Might make more when you're married. Yeah, so when we get into specific, right. And we can get into, once it gets really specific, there's some things that I would say to your dad if he was here, but that's a different story. And so when it gets specific, it gets necessarily more detailed, right? So we have to be careful of that. All right, let's flip quickly to the family. So keep going in the Catechism, 2201. So the family, what is it? Let's look at its origin, its essence, and its end. So its origin, 2201. The conjugal community is established upon the consent of the spouses. Marriage and the family are ordered to the good of the spouses and to the procreation and education of children. The love of the spouses and the begetting of children create among members of the same family personal relationships and primordial responsibilities. So, the origin of the family, leaving aside the fact that God, as I would try to provocatively say, arranges every marriage because he calls man and woman together. The origin is established by consent. So when you guys exchange consent, and then it's consummated, you're husband and wife. But consent is what's at the heart of it. That's why that's why you have to be free to enter into marriage. So I can't be coerced, I can't be pressured, I can't do this because someone's making me do it, and I have to actually have the emotional freedom to be able to give myself to another person, because the essence of this is me being able to say to the other person, I give you myself. I enter into a partnership of life with you. So I have to have self-possession. Some people don't have that or don't have it yet because they have emotional things they might have to work through. That's fine. We'll work through those to hopefully bring them to a point where they're able to say that. But that's what makes the marriage, okay? So the essence, 2202. A man and a woman united in marriage together with their children form a family. This institution is prior to any recognition by public authority, which has an obligation to recognize it. It should be considered the normal reference point by which the different forms of family relationships are to be evaluated. So what the Catechism is simply trying to remind us of here, what the Scriptures are trying to remind us, is in the order of things, like, so before the state is the family. The state exists for the service of families and communities and the common life. We're seeing that curtailed like crazy right now and attacked like crazy right now. So you bring your 13-year-old daughter in to see a doctor, and your doctor isn't going to tell you what she said to your daughter, because your daughter has rights, and the state's going to protect her from who? From her mother? Whoa. Now we're in trouble. With me? So we're creating an antagonistic relationship within the family. Well, I don't want your mom to know this because she might not like it, but why don't I just give you these? Because, you might get in trouble sometimes, so I don't want you to get pregnant, so don't tell her, don't worry. Just take this. And that's normal. And we've just seen the undermining of family. And, by the way, sowed a little lie into a child's head. Your mother doesn't really love you. Which sounds a lot like somebody who said something in the garden. What's the end? So the purpose, that's another way to think of this. So the purpose of marriage, it's two things. It's the good of the spouses and the procreation, the education of children. First, the good of the spouses. That's the more formal way of saying what I've been talking about earlier, that the point of marriage, the way I would kind of bluntly summarize it, is to make God tangible to your spouse. That's the point. So that they can say, I know God better because of you. That's the good of the spouses. There's no better good you can give to your husband and your wife than to be a manifestation of the Lord to them, because he is the good one. And it's also to the procreation, the education of children. So God gives parents this most extraordinary gift of collaborating with him and bringing into existence an immortal soul. And if he gives you a child, he gives you a child so that the child can come to know him. And it's your incredible task to introduce him or her to the Lord and to witness to him in all you do and say. And sometimes that means, gosh, I'm sorry, I think I was a bad witness. Because we all have to do that at times. And education doesn't mean, you send them to high school. The most important thing you can teach your children is to teach your children the faith. So this is called, the Catechism and the church often refers to the family as the domestic church. This is an expression which is perhaps familiar to some of us. Maybe it's not familiar to others. So in other words, so the domestic church, the family is the house church. And the first priests are who? Mom and dad. All right? By baptism, everyone becomes a priest. I'm a priest of a different kind. Before I was this kind of priest, I was that kind of priest. So everybody in here who's baptized and everybody who's going to be baptized is a priest. Priests do one main thing. They offer sacrifices. So it's a parent's incredible gift and responsibility to exercise that authority in the home and to turn the home into a house church. Meaning here's the place where we encounter love, where we encounter God, where we encounter mercy, where we learn how to serve, where we learn how to ask for forgiveness, where we forgive, where we give, all those things. That's what the house is supposed to be. As opposed to, well, we do our stuff here and then we go to the church and this is a completely different world. No. What we do at the house is just supposed to prepare for what we do when we get into the church. It should be normal by that point. It's where we learned how to worship. It's not the norm all the time, I know. All right, let me fly through a couple things. Told you I was going to put me to sleep. Let's look quickly. Flip to 22:19. Let's look at the responsibilities of children and then responsibilities of parents. So I would say there's four main things for children. First is respect. So 22:19 says, filial respect promotes harmony in all of family life. It also concerns relationships between brothers and sisters. Respect towards parents fills the home with light and warmth. Grandchildren are the crown of the aged, and with all humility and meekness, with patience, support one another in charity. So what's being asked of children in the fourth commandment? First, respect. Second, gratitude. Flip to 22:15. Respect for parents derives from gratitude toward those who, by their gift of life, their love and their work, have brought their children into the world and enabled them to grow in stature, wisdom, and grace. With all your heart, honor your father and do not forget the birth pangs of your mother. Here's that passage we looked at from Sirach 7. Remember that through your parents you were born, and what can you give back to them that equals their gift to you? So as a child, I'm forever a child, right? I want to constantly show gratitude to my mom. My mom was told to abort me. I'm really grateful she didn't. Obedience. 22:16. Filial respect is shown by true docility, that's teachability, huh? And obedience. My son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. And when you awake, they will talk to you. A wise son hears his father's instruction, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. And then lastly, kind of helping us understand obedience, especially as someone gets older, the last thing that's entailed is support. So the fourth commandment, this is 22:18, reminds grown children of their responsibility toward their parents. As much as they can, they must give them material and moral support in old age and in times of illness, loneliness, or distress. Jesus recalls this duty of gratitude. So once I've left the home, I'm not obedient anymore. So long as I'm in my house, my mom and dad's house, I'm obedient. So parents come to me all the time and go, my child doesn't want to go to Mass. What do I do? Well, I don't know. Your kid want to go to school? Probably not. At least some days. Do you say, oh, okay, why don't you just stay home? Like, you love your kid, right? So I appreciate you want to go to school. You're going to school. Like, put your clothes on, go. So you live in our house? This is what we do in our house. And you have my absolute permission to not be okay with that. I'm fine if you're mad at me. It's okay. Because I'm not trying to be your friend right now. So it's fine. Oh, Dad. That's okay. Your opinion of me right now doesn't matter. You are a barbarian, and I'm trying to civilize you. You little pirate. Take the eye patch off and go get your clothes on. But I'm amazed how many times parents ask that question. What should we do? Well, you wouldn't let your kid eat chocolate all day long. Hopefully. Or drink lighter fluid. Oh, they really like the taste, though. Like, so when I'm no longer at home, I don't need to be obedient, but I do need to support my parents, and I do need to respect them, and I do need to be grateful. So what's on the end of parents? Because remember, parents come first. Because they're going to prepare the children for this. Because no one's going to shape a child's life and an understanding of a child's life of God more than parents and more than a father. Because God is Father. He's not male, but he's Father. And so a father's witness is going to shape a child's life more than anyone's witness of God. That's not to say that, so oftentimes, my sisters, will say, well, my husband was a jerk, or he died, or he was abusive and he left. So don't worry, God's not thwarted because of that. He can make up for things. But there's still some issues there that he's going to need to heal, and he will heal. He'll bring people into their lives. But it's just a reality. All things aren't fair. So my image of God is almost entirely shaped by my dad. And that's a good thing, because I had a great dad. I know not everybody in here can say that. And God can heal that. That's okay. And so we ask the Lord, just keep showing me who you are. Help me to know you as you really are. So I don't project onto you a deformed image that I might have. So parents have tasks as well. The first thing is education. So 22:21. The fruitfulness or the fecundity of conjugal love cannot be reduced solely to the procreation of children, but must extend to their moral education and their spiritual formation. The role of parents in education is of such importance that it is almost impossible to provide an adequate substitute. The right and duty of parents to educate their children are primordial and inalienable. There's three things that every study is showing right now about the absolute impact of parents. And hands down, the single most important pastors for a child are parents. There's not a close second. Not a catechist, not a priest, not a minister, not a nobody. It's moms and dads, and they do three things. They go to church, they talk about the faith at home, and they pray. Those three things make all the difference in the world. You go to church, talk about the faith at home, and you pray. It's not magic. Your child's still willful. They can do whatever they want, right? But those three things are huge for laying a foundation. The way studies talk about it now, those things create kind of like a glass ceiling, religiously speaking, that your children will rarely rise above. They might, by God's grace, because God can do anything. But mass, pray, talk about the faith. So that's the education. Second thing, 22:22, is respect. So there's respect from children to parents, and there's respect from parents to children. Parents must regard their children as children of God and respect them as human persons. Showing themselves obedient to the will of the Father in heaven, they educate their children to fulfill God's law. Third thing that is enjoined on parents is a good example. So 22:23. Parents have the first responsibility for the education of their children. They bear witness to this responsibility first by creating a home where tenderness, forgiveness, respect, fidelity, and disinterested service are the rule. The home is well suited for education in the virtues. This requires an apprenticeship in self-denial, sound judgment, and self-mastery, which are the preconditions of all true freedom. So someone used the image once. Anybody here play piano? Who plays piano really well in here? Be honest, like really well. Be humble. Real humility is like, yeah, I'm actually a concert pianist. Anybody really good? Pretty good? Okay, so when you first start learning piano, what do you learn? Yeah, you learn scales, right? And chopsticks and little things. And it's like, why am I doing all this? But you learn these strict disciplines when you're early so that sooner or later you can sit down on a piano and you just improv. And it's glorious, right? But you don't just sit down at the piano and do that. You do that by self-discipline first and by training and by mastery. Those are the scales. So that's how it works in life. Like we're supposed to, by the time we get to maturity as an adult, I'm supposed to just be able to like improv life. And you did that by learning scales on all sorts of little things with regards to self-discipline and whatnot, with anger, with, unforgiveness, with selfishness, with whatever it is. Hopefully someone helped us to learn that's not going to help you. In the same way that someone who cared for me and wanted me to grow up to be a concert pianist said, I know that you find this really boring and monotonous right now, but one day you're going to sit down and you're just going to go at it. And it's going to be glorious. But you're not just going to do that. So it is with life. So parents demonstrate this example. They have this education in virtues. Parents should teach their children to subordinate the material and instinctual dimensions to interior and spiritual ones. How do you do that? You say no. And that's hard. But you say no. Dad, can I have that? And because I'm a child, and I know my dad's buttons to push, I know sooner or later my dad will be so annoyed by me keep going, can I, Dad, can I get that? Can I have that? And because he's so exhausted by my nagging, he just goes, fine, if it will shut you up, you can have it. He didn't say that, but that's the mentality of it oftentimes, right? So it's like, here. When actually the best thing for me would have been, no, and it's okay, you can just keep talking. I'm going to put my headphones in right now so you can't hear me. I can't hear you, although he didn't have headphones back then. Parents have a grave responsibility to give good example to their children. A grave responsibility. By knowing how to acknowledge their own failings to their children, parents will be better able to guide and correct them. So a great thing, like on the rare occasions when my mom and dad did something they shouldn't have done, they actually asked, us to forgive them. That happened like maybe once. But we never forgot it. Because they came to us and said something. And so I knew they had hurt us. That was huge, as opposed to them giving off this image that we're moms and dads and we never make mistakes. It's always your fault. Fourth thing, evangelization, 22-25. We're almost done. Through the grace of the sacrament of marriage, parents receive the responsibility and the privilege of evangelizing their children. Parents should initiate their children at an early age into the mysteries of the faith of which they are the first heralds for their children. They should associate them from their tenderest years with the life of the church. A wholesome family life can foster interior dispositions that are a genuine preparation for a living faith and remain a support for it throughout one's life. Archbishop, in his pastoral letter, talks about how it's been a common thing over the last several decades for parents to kind of pass off the task of teaching their children to faith, the faith to Catholic schools or religious ed, and then he just begs pastors and parishes to do everything they can to not let that happen. And so we're trying to do that. So no one's witness of the faith compares with a mom's or dad's. So if it's not lived at home, whatever they hear at religious ed or at Catholic school just isn't going to make a difference. Because they're going to go home and they're going to see a different witness, and then they're going to wake up one day and go, why are we paying a couple $1,000s a year for you to send me to a place where we learn stuff that we don't do? Why not just, like, either this is true and we should do it, or, like, let me just go to a public school. Like, why waste the money? Fourth thing, and then there's one more after this. Fourth thing is discipline. So entailed on parents in the fourth commandment is to discipline their children. That's hard, right? But I am, so maybe remember what the word meek means? Yeah, strength under control. So when I was born, I was a wild horse. And my dad had to meek me after he himself got meeked. My dad's nickname at work was the flamethrower. He got meeked later in life. I was like the butane lighter or something, I guess. I don't know. But, I mean, he had to train me because I easily went out of control. And you do that in all sorts of different ways. As you learn how to discipline your child, what they respond to, what they don't respond to. Sooner or later, you find something they respond to. Usually it's taking away the thing they like the most. That gets their attention. Got mine. It's like, okay, I'll be good. So discipline's key. And then lastly, this is to fathers in a special way. So this is, I think, the most beautiful thing ever written to dads I've ever seen. Pope John Paul II wrote this in a letter on the role of the Christian family. He says, in revealing and in reliving on earth the very fatherhood of God. So get a hold of those two words. Revealing and reliving. How many people in here are dads? Okay, brothers, this is your, after your relationship to your wife, this is your primary task in life. To reveal and relive God's fatherhood. It's what he's asking you to do, and he's equipping you to do. In doing this, a man is called upon to ensure the harmonious and united development of all the members of the family. He will perform this task by exercising generous responsibility for the life conceived, this is a great expression, under the heart of the mother. By a more solicitous commitment to education, a task he shares with his wife. By work which is never a cause of division in the family, but promotes its unity and stability. And by means of the witness he gives of an adult Christian life, which effectively introduces the children into the living experience of Christ and the church. That's the marching orders for a Christian dad. It's the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen written on fatherhood. It's one paragraph. If men did this, the world would be a vastly different place. Like, you want a Lenten exercise, brothers? Meditate on that. And beg the Lord, Lord, show me how to do this. Show me where I'm not doing it. Encourage me where I am. Give me strength. All the things that it is that you're asking me to be, so that one day my son and my daughter will say to me, you know, Dad, because of you, I have a really great image of God. Because of you, Psalm 103 has come alive. The Lord is compassionate and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in kindness. As a father has compassion on his sons, so the Lord has compassion on us, for he knows our frame. That's a man's task. And no greater thing will your child ever say to you than, you have helped me know God. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that I was able to tell my dad that before he left this earth. So there's a lot in there, right? These are the things that are all entailed in headship. So the man isn't head of his family, he's the head of his wife. Head of the family is not a biblical expression. Head of his wife is. But head as Christ is head, and Christ is head as servant, as one who lays down his life, who takes the initiative in self-giving, to which the wife responds by a total gift of self. And when a man learns to do that, and a woman can surrender to that, and you got harmony there, then you just got this remarkably peaceful home in which children can grow. They're still going to be difficult, but it's a different home. And no matter where we might be right now in our relationships, we can still do this. Because that's the power of grace. Power of grace is this can bust into our family right now, tonight. Even if my spouse is dead, left the house, my kids are whatever age, doesn't matter. Like God's not bound by the past or by circumstances. We invite him in, he brings dead things to life. We just got to ask him and work. So, I'd encourage you to look at the rest of the section of the Catechism because it goes on from here to talk about the state and a whole host of other things that are entailed. But for our purposes here, I think this is sufficient for tonight.